88.3 WXOU. You're listening to Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer. We got a big show today. We're going to review the draft, both of the Lions and the rest of the league. Some big surprises in the first round, especially with E.J. Manuel going to the Bills. We're going to talk Red Wings playoffs as they're in the quest for the Stanley Cup as the 7th seed in the West. We're also going to get into the Tigers with just their season continuing on, coming off a 6-2 homestand, and then we're going to get into some of the Big Ten alignments, new alignment that came out with East and West divisions. So we're going to get into that. Tim, excited to be here?
Oh, absolutely. Nice day outside. And, finally April and the D is over, but still some big sports things going on. So, very excited.
Yeah. All right, we're going to start off by getting into the draft. We are going to review the Lions. They drafted number 5 overall. They were not able to trade down, which a lot of people were hoping that they would be able to do. They just stuck there at number 5 and took Ezekiel Ansah, the defensive end from BYU, kind of a project player. But he has the ability to be a Pro Bowler. I mean, it's kind of a Pro Bowler or a bust. A lot of people said he's either going to be, in 3 years, he'll either be in Honolulu or he'll be on the street. So, it's kind of a boomer bust pick, but it's an exciting one for Lions fans who, are trying to replace pass rushers of the past like Robert Porcher and even a guy like Luther Ellis and even a guy who just recently left in Cliff Averill. So they needed that defensive playmaker, and hopefully that's what they got in Ansah.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, everybody uses the word raw to describe him. He only started 9 college games, and, he's only been playing college football for a couple of years, a couple of games here. He's not. He came in. He played. He thought about playing college basketball first at BYU, and now he made it on the BYU team. And he's a guy who can fill gaps and get to the ball carrier. But I don't see him as a guy that will have an immediate impact for the Lions per se. I think he's a guy that still is. He's not necessarily a project player. I mean, he was taken at number 5, but he's still a guy that is going to need some work and most importantly experience. I mean, only playing, not even starting the entire college season for BYU is something that he's going to need to just learn. Not how to play football, but just learn how to play that position more and fit in their system. So he's not someone who you can be excited, like you said. He could be a guy who's either going to be a boom or bust. So, he might have a huge impact maybe in a year or two, but I don't see him, week 1 of the season, getting 2 sacks. He's a guy who is exciting, but he's not a guy that even puts the Lions over the top right now, but he could be a Pro Bowler in a couple of years.
He's not an immediate impact kind of guy. He's not even a guy like Ndamukong Suh, who came out and had, I think it was 12 sacks his rookie year.
Suh came in and, and he was a guy who, when they drafted him, people are like, hey, he's a rookie. You can't expect all this out of him. And he really had a great rookie. That was the best season of his whole campaign so far.
Won Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Oh, absolutely. And he was deserving of it. I mean, he made an immediate impact for the Lions. And this Ansah guy, he's someone who I'm not necessarily, if I was a Lions fan, I'm not necessarily, not thrilled with the pick, but I'm not, upset about it either, because there's some guys and some playmakers that were taken early on in the draft that you might see, week 1 Sunday, doing stuff for your team. But this draft, I mean, we talked about it last week, was one that was maybe a bit weaker than it has been in years past. And there wasn't even a for sure number 1 guy. Eric Fisher's taken number 1, a Central Michigan guy, Rochester Hills, a local guy. But there was early on, there was a lot of linemen and pass rushers taken by a lot of teams. So, on offense and defense on the line. So teams were kind of getting building blocks for their teams as opposed to, that can't miss. There wasn't any can't miss quarterbacks really. And there wasn't, besides Tavon Austin, there wasn't somebody who's, a flashy offensive player. So pleased with the pick. Hopefully he can come in and make something happen. But I'll be interested to see what he does, especially in the preseason. Because it'll be interesting is he worth that number 5 overall. He has the body and size and skills possibly to do it, but can he fill that those expectations? Because really that's what he is. He's full of expectations.
Right. I think if he comes in his rookie year and is able to get maybe 6 to 10 sacks,
I think that's pretty high for him.
I think if you pick a guy number 5 overall, whether he's a project or not,
I would agree.
I think you have to expect at least 6,
because
7 sacks.
If I remember right, he only had 4.5 sacks at BYU, and he's playing teams like Colorado,
Right.
and he wasn't exactly playing big name schools. And BYU isn't a premier college
Right.
program. So, you'd like to maybe see him get a couple more sacks against Hawaii or something. But, I think 6 to 10 is high because I don't think he's going to be a starter.
I think he's absolutely a starter.
And that's why I'd be interested to see what happens in the preseason.
I think the first 4 picks the Lions made are all starters. I think both defensive ends will start. Because I think that Jason Jones is a guy who they can move inside. And even though they have a pretty deep defensive tackle rotation, Jason Jones is going to be a guy who plays both inside and outside. And then I think Ansah is a unquestioned starter. I think he can play left or right end, so that helps. And the other guy that they drafted was the defensive end Taylor from South Carolina, who played opposite Jadeveon Clowney, the most likely going to be the number 1 pick in next year's NFL draft. But I mean, I think that the Lions draft was pretty solid. They end up with 9 picks as opposed to the 8 that they went in with because they traded back in the 5th round and picked up an extra 6th round pick. 4 of the 9 picks were defense. I know I said last week I hope 6 of the 8 were defense.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit uncomfortable from that standpoint, from the fact that they took less than half.
But
defense.
I know it wouldn't. I know we watched first round, and then we were watching some of the second and third rounds the next day. And you were saying that the order that they pick people in, you really couldn't have asked for a better.
The first 4 picks I thought were pretty much ideal. You start off with a defensive end in Ansah, and then you go with a cornerback in Slay from Mississippi State, and then you go with Warford, the big guard from Kentucky.
Which many analysts say could have been the best value pick for the Lions.
Right. And then the 4th round, you pick Taylor from South Carolina, who could be your other defensive end starter. So, I mean, I think you solidify the offensive line, and what you really do is you give Riley Reif his position. He is the Lions' left tackle. There is none of this, he can move inside, garbage. There's none of that. It's going to be, he's going to be the left tackle.
I kind of thought he was a tight end.
But no, I think you have Reif left tackle. You have Raiola at center. You have this Warford guy. And then Cherilus is gone. So Jason Fox is probably your right tackle. And then you have a returning starter at left guard. So, I mean, I think the Lions' offensive line definitely got better with younger talent, and with Reif being able to play a significant amount of snaps this year as opposed to last year. And you have some young talent that you can develop there. And even though they're young, I think there's definitely a lot of talent there, and they have the ability to protect Matt Stafford and, most of all, get better at run blocking, which is something that they struggled with a lot the past 3 to 4 years.
Open up some holes for Reggie Bush.
Right, because that's something that Jeff Backus wasn't great at. Gossard Cherilus wasn't great at, but you have a big guard now in Warford who can make up for the undersized center in Dominic Raiola.
I mean, Peterman was good at it, but he was good at holding while doing it.
Exactly. A lot of offensive line problems in the past for the Lions, and I think finally you have a young line. The only thing you're going to need to replace soon is the center position with Dominic Raiola, who just signed a 1-year contract.
Right, and this is, I mean, it's probably, people thought maybe this was the end for him. He comes back. I mean, you got to think that, if anything, the Lions might show him the door.
Right. Because... And, I mean, the only reason he came back is because he signed a 1-year contract for something like, it was like $750,000.
Right. And he's a guy who's, one of the most passionate players out there, undoubtedly. Right. And so he's a guy who, when he saw the Lions, flash of recent success, especially 2 years ago, he was very excited. That was something that you could tell of all the players that it affected. He was... a guy that lives and dies, obviously, with their success on the field. So he's a guy who maybe wants, one last chance. And they're not exactly, it's not like, signing with a contender per se, but I don't think he would exactly go and sign with Green Bay or something.
He's been a Lion his whole career, and I think he wants to be a Lion. So, like you said, it's probably going to be his last season, and they'll probably have to either draft a center in next year's draft. That's why a lot of people wanted him to take Barrett Jones from Alabama, because he's a versatile guy who could have played guard this year and center next year. But they didn't do that. But you're probably gonna have to replace Raiola after next season. But then the most surprising pick for the Lions was in the 5th round. After those solid top four picks, they come back and draft a punter in Sam Martin. Tim, what did you think about that?
Well, considering he's the only punter selected in the entire draft, he's a guy who came out of Appalachian State. It's not exactly some big school, but I mean, punters are, it's not like you need great players to play with to punt. It kind of shows how how far it goes and how deep it is. But I know they've had a couple of 3, 4, 5 punters over the past 2-3 seasons. After they had Nick Harris for a while, and then they had some guys come in, and then Nick Harris finished the year last year and didn't exactly have the greatest season. Being able to flip the field is great, but I don't know if a 5th round pick is warranted. Because when it comes to punters, they're kind of, unless you have someone who's like, a really good guy, they can kind of be interchangeable. People sign punters off the street, because you can. Because if you can kind of kick a ball, it's something you're, relatively good at. It doesn't take a lot of training. You don't have to fit into a system, obviously. So I would think that, and this was a pick that they traded down. And I remember saying to you, hey, they probably think they could still get their guy. And they obviously did, since he was the only punter taken. And I don't know much about him. A lot of people were surprised by it. It wouldn't have surprised me if maybe they could have gotten him in the 6th or 7th round as well, because it wasn't like he was a can't miss punting prospect. So maybe they just got a little trigger happy on this guy. In fact, maybe he could have been an undrafted free agent, which would have been your most ideal thing. And that's why I think it's, unless he is just, really good next year, it might be a waste of a pick in that they could have had somebody else. And he definitely has to make the team, which he probably will. But, taking a punter that high just to me is kind of, that's the thing you joke about,
Right.
So a 5th round pick, maybe you could have brought in another receiver. You could brought in some, address a different need, as opposed to
or a linebacker, which they didn't take until the last pick in the 7th round. I think if you would have taken the punter the last pick of the 7th round, I think it would have been a solid pick. Right. You ensure that you get the guy that you want. You don't have to worry about other teams signing him.
Because that's a good place of taking a chance. Right. Taking a chance in the 5th round, I'd rather see them even, like a running back or something. I'd rather see them reach for someone there that's a skill position rather than, or even you talk about Barrett Jones or something. You could have switched that out, and I would have liked that better, I think.
Yeah, the punter at 5 is a little bit high, but it is what it is. And if he comes in and he's their punter, then it's a starter per se, So if you can get your top 5 picks, like I said, I think the top 4 will be starters. If you can increase that to a top 5, even if it is a punter, I think it's not the worst thing they could have done. That is what it is. But the bottom line is, after every draft, you ask, did the team get better? And in my opinion, I think the Lions got a lot better, especially along the offensive line and the defensive line, which is, like you said before, the building blocks for the teams. What'd you think about the Lions?
Overall, like you said, I know that when we did our show last week, you said, hey, I want them to go all defense. And I said, I'd be really surprised if they do 6 of 8. I said something like, half of their picks at defense. Their defensive unit is definitely something that struggled last season. I mean, their offense did towards the end of the season, but that's because they had many injuries. Overall, they have some picks that, it starts obviously with Ansa. He's your number 1 guy, and he's a guy that you have to wait and see. And I think that's some of this draft is kind of like that. Even though you said a lot of them are going to be starters, and I'm not so sure about that. I think you have to wait and see. That's kind of the way this draft is. And I think it kind of fits the Lions in that they're not exactly a team that, there's a reason they're drafting number 5. They're not a team that you're like, hey, even you don't pick, a lot of people don't pick them to win their division. A lot of people don't pick them to do much more than that. Right. So this is, picks that in, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, maybe they are solid contributors. And if that's the case, then you like this draft. And that's why I know people always want to give grades on drafts and you say, and I'm always very wary of that because
right, you have to wait till the picks actually develop.
You can have them all on paper and you can have all this college game tape and all their highlights and running around in the combine, and that's all great. But until you see what they do on the field, that's when I would be, willing to give a grade. So excited to see what some of these guys do in the preseason, along with some of their undrafted free agents, everybody they bring in, and hopefully they made themselves better. And I think no question they made themselves better when you ask about that. So it's a good draft. It's not like they had some real head scratchers,
right.
and that's why I would like what they did, because you look at what a lot of analysts said. A lot of people said, hey, I really like what the Lions did here, and I think that it's interesting, especially first-round picks, always what really defines a draft. Ansa is a guy that really was not their guy. They thought maybe they wanted an offensive lineman and some of those guys. There's kind of a run on those right at the beginning, and I think that Ansa might have been their second or third choice. So that's not worrisome because you're still getting great talent when you're drafting number 5.
Right. And I mean, he may be their second or third choice, but you're picking 5th.
Exactly.
So, I mean, odds are, yes, everybody had, Luke Jokel and Eric Fisher 1-2 on their boards, most likely, unless you have a franchise left tackle. But, I mean, if you get your second or third choice and you're 5th or 6th in the draft, right, then, I mean, that's better than, your 5th or 6th choice at 5th or 6th in the draft.
And I'm glad that they didn't, I know you really wanted them to trade down, and that would have been awesome if they could have gotten another second-round pick. But I'm glad they didn't do something like a Tavon Austin or something like in that vein. Where,
right, we both said that would have been an absolute disaster.
Right, and so that's what I think. They played it safe, even though this is kind of it's. Like you said, a wait-and-see pick with especially Ansa. They got good value for their picks, especially number 3 with the lineman out of Kentucky. So overall, I like I said, I don't like grading, but I definitely wouldn't give it, like an F or something like that. Right. I would say it's solid. Besides that punter, I think that definitely is a reach to me, especially when he's the only punter taken and no one was really talking about him. I think you could have gotten something better, and then you bring a punter, because honestly, I don't think, unless you have, like I said, a premier punter like an Andy Lee or something, the guy
Shane Leckler,
who's now in Houston, that wins you games. But you can flip the field. But you can have a punter that kicks it 35, 40 yards, and you're going to be in a ball game.
And it's still a 5th round pick. Exactly. I mean, 5th round picks, you're not expecting a whole lot of production, especially the first year.
And I think, it's really good that we're here this year, or here the week after the draft. We talked about beforehand, we broke down, and I think it's good that the only thing we're really kind of complaining about maybe is a 5th round pick. And while it is a punter and it's kind of questionable, we're not sitting here saying, hey, Mayhew, why did you take, like Tavon Austin, why'd you take him, or why'd you do this, or why'd you reach for Denard?
And there was no like a Brandon Pettigrew pick where they move back up into the first round and take a luxury player.
Or a Javid Best who has a questionable thing.
Right. So, I mean, if, like you said, you're complaining about a 5th round pick, you can live with it, especially with some of the Lions' past drafts. But some of the bigger name players that went in the draft, like Manti Te'o, goes in the 2nd round of the Chargers. What'd you think of that landing spot for him?
He's a guy that he's talented, and he was a leader at Notre Dame, but then he obviously had all this stuff in the offseason. It started with his really poor performance against Alabama, and that's the thing, when you're playing at the NFL level, you're going to see quality teams. And so when you're playing at Notre Dame and you're, blowing out Navy and all these teams, it's like, well, and you're, struggling to beat Pitt in overtime. That's maybe his competition he was facing wasn't the greatest. But, I think that's not the worst landing spot for him. I think he could maybe play there. I know that their middle linebacker up like a year ago was like Takeo Spikes, who's like in his 20th year in the league. So he's a guy that I think he could have a solid NFL career. It's just he's someone who just has so much baggage, and it's going to follow him undoubtedly.
He might be a little bit of a head case, and I think it's a good place for him because, number one, there's palm trees there, just like in Hawaii. So, the warm weather, that'll help him out. And then also, it's not a media hotbed. I mean, San Diego is a big city, but it's not New York. It's not, obviously there's not an NFL team in LA, but, it's not even a San Francisco or even New England, where there's a big following, a lot of fans. San Diego it's not a small market, but it's one of those middle markets.
And it's good that he wasn't taken by, I know a lot of people had him going the very end to Baltimore. And, he doesn't have these expectations of filling the shoes of Ray
Right.
Lewis. I mean, obviously they had guys, they had Junior Seau, 10 years ago. But he's not sitting there. People aren't like, hey, how are you going to fill the shoes of this guy?
Right, or Sean Merriman, who
Right.
kind of flamed out there. But, yeah, I thought it was a solid spot for Manti Te'o. And then the other one would be the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, who goes to Arizona. I thought that was also a pretty solid landing spot with him. A fellow LSU alumni in Patrick Peterson.
They do like the same exact thing, though. That we were talking. I mean,
Right.
They both return. They're both, and there's talk of Matthew might play center. Or I'm sorry, not center, safety. I'm sorry, as opposed to corner.
Talk about undersized center.
I meant, yeah, he can play safety, and he's a guy that 2 years ago he was standing on the stage with Robert Griffin and Luck as a Heisman finalist, and he has his off the field issues, but he's a guy who's extremely talented. And can change a game with a return or an interception or something. So, and there again, Arizona is not exactly a place where, he's going to have these high expectations that he's going into.
Right. I mean, I think it's a solid. I think both those big name players who had a little bit of a falling out towards the end landed in good spots for them, and you can only hope for the best for them and hope that they succeed. But we're gonna move on to some Red Wings talk now. Game 2 versus the Ducks is tonight at 10 o'clock on NBC Sports Network. They dropped Game 1 in Anaheim on Tuesday night, and they lost 3-1. It was a 2-1 game, and then in the last 30 seconds they gave up an empty netter, pretty typical. And they get
180 feet away.
Right, yeah, off a face-off. I mean, it was kind of a crazy goal. But regardless, it's a 3-1 loss, and they get outshot 27-22, so not terrible, just 5-shot difference. And the big stat I thought was both teams had 4 power plays. Anaheim was 2 for 4. Detroit was 1 for 4.
That's absolutely. They converted one after the other. Anaheim converted their first one, Detroit converted one, and then Anaheim converted their next one. And that was, special teams are something that really can, turn the tide in a game, especially when you have, like you said, only a 5-shot difference. Watching the game, there were, especially in the second period, there were long periods of time that Anaheim possessed the puck and just kept it in the their attacking zone for a long time. It's just. I know I had said initially, whoever wins the first game is going to win the series, and I know that might sound kind of brash or something, but I thought that in order for the Red Wings to win, I know a lot, especially at the local level, were picking the Red Wings to this to be one of the upsets, and a lot of national pundits were putting this to be really one of the upsets per se, especially 7-2, because you usually see that in hockey. And they really liked this matchup because the Wings were, over the last week and a half, 2 weeks of the season, they were one of the best teams in the league.
Right. I mean, they win 4 in a row to get into the playoffs.
Right. And it was their first time of scoring 3 goals or more in 3 straight games.
Right.
They were coming together, and Jimmy Howard was playing really well, and they were saying, "Hey, we're gonna ride Jimmy, in the playoffs." And that's, a lot of times it comes down to a hot goalie. And I thought that Jonas Hiller really was that hot goalie. I know a lot of people were picking Jimmy Howard to steal the series, but I thought Hiller he made some really great saves, and really, obviously led Anaheim to that victory, because you looked at the goals. I mean, there was 2 redirects, and then Teemu Selanne just sniped one on the power play that Jimmy Howard maybe could have gotten to. I know people are, but that was a really quick shot. And then there's an empty net, and that was it.
Right.
Besides that, stellar goalie play on both sides. So, they played tonight, and if I think if the Red Wings want any shot at winning this series, they have to win tonight. If they go down 2-0, I think there's 0 chance that they win. And I know that you can have some times where, but I think especially in hockey, they have to split. I said that at the beginning, that's why I said whoever would win the first game win the series. And I think the Red Wings can win tonight, but they're going to have to. Just some of their penalties, like you were talking about the power play, were just stupid penalties. They weren't exactly, they just kind of poor play when you you let the other team just hold the puck down there. So it's simple stuff, and I know everybody pretends to know hockey a ton at this time of year, but if the other team keeps a puck down there more than you do, generally that's what's going to happen.
I mean, the worst penalty was with 18 seconds left in the second period. He throws it over the boards.
Yep.
You get a delay game penalty, and then Kindle, and then you come back in the third period, and you're already on the penalty kill.
And that there was a huge momentum swing because the Ducks had the Wings on their heels, and they kept it down there, and then like you said, before the end,
and the Wings were going to survive it. It was that last 4 minutes were pretty bad for the Wings,
right?
And all they had to do was get to that third period, and they were there. And then he throws it over the boards, and then you start the third period with the same way you were surviving the second period.
Absolutely, and they opened it with a goal, and they have a 2-goal lead they had the lead for the whole period. And the Red Wings had some chances. They had a power play late, but it was a really good game. It was a close game. But you're absolutely right. I just thought that there were some really stupid penalties, and that's what cost them the game.
Right, and you would expect, even though the Wings in the series for once are actually the younger team, with guys like Rusalani for the Anaheim Ducks, who's like 42.
Team Rusalani, absolutely.
But yeah, I also think the Wings need to win tonight. Even it up 1-1. Yes, if they go down 2-0 and come back to the Joe and win 2 in a row, it makes it a 3-game series. But the odds of that happening aren't good. We saw last year when they were in Nashville, they lost the first 2, and then they come back here and they lose game 3. Or I don't know if they lost game 3 or game 4, but it's still, when you're down 2-0, it's still difficult to protect your home ice because a lot of times the fans aren't as into it. They're kind of, they've already given up on it. And it was game 3 that they lost because I was at that game, now that I think about it. But, I mean, for the Wings, they won 4 in a row to get into the playoffs. It's really the first time that they've had to, actually play the end of the regular season to qualify for the playoffs. Because usually, they're 2, 3, 4 seed. So they're kind of in, with a couple weeks to go. But this time they actually had to play to get in. They do so, and they even grab the 7 seed and avoid Chicago.
I think that was huge,
right?
Because, it's funny, Chicago barely beats Minnesota with a backup goaltender in overtime at home. But regardless, Chicago is far and away the best team in the league right now, and they deserve that number 1 seed in the President's Trophy. And you looked at the last game the Wings played, a 7-1 thrashing at the hands of the Hawks. So and they match up well with the Ducks. That's why a lot of teams...
Was that thrashing a former Thrashers reference?
No, I'm just saying they really didn't match up well with the Hawks. But I think that's why a lot of people were picking the Wings and the potential upset. But you look at how they played, and there wasn't like they played just awful, but they really need to win tonight, and I think there's no question. If you have any chance in this series and, win to then get thrashed by the Hawks in the second round, right, you're going to need to win tonight. And
you got to score goals. I mean, you're not going to win a game scoring 1 goal. You're just not going to. You can't expect Jimmy Howard to put up a shutout in the playoffs in a game 1 first round series.
Well, I mean, and it's not like he had some strong saves that, and the goals he gave up were, one was a redirect and one was a snipe, and then empty net.
He was screened, and then
right. And that's what I'm saying. He didn't play well, but I thought Hiller just played a bit better. He made some better saves, he just made saves when he needed to, and that's why they won the game. And we're coming out here at the end of the segment. You talk about a team that did score goals, the Pittsburgh Penguins won 5-0 last night in their march in the playoffs here. And I know that Puckett's here rolling his eyes, but I had to give a little shout out there. And because we talk about all teams, we didn't break down any of the Steelers picks there in the first segment. I was kind of disappointed, but the Penguins. You asked me before the off air a couple of days ago what I really expected out of that first game, and I said I wanted strong offense and I wanted a good game by Fleury, and you saw both of that last night.
I didn't see anything, actually.
Well, no, I watched the majority of the game. Fleury had 26 saves, and the Penguins killed off 6 power plays by the Islanders, which was the one aspect of the game that worried me because they have a strong power play, and the penalty kill on the Penguins is a little suspect. But they beat up John Tavares and chased Nabokov in the second period, and it was very exciting. Great start to the season, sans Crosby. So... I'm confident after that first game that Fleury didn't, give up a stinker, and they're a team that should be reckoned with. I know you're really enjoying this right now, Puckett.
You want to take over the segment? You just
I saw we were coming here to the end of the segment, so I just thought I would give a little shout out. And
he hasn't been paying attention to any of the Wings talk, and then he just comes in with the Pittsburgh bull crap.
You talked about it, a team that needs to score some goals, and I just was giving you a.
They don't need to score. They scored 5
no,
goals.
You were talking about the Wings need to score goals. I just gave
this guy. He's got no segues. Unbelievable. All right, that's the end of the segment. It was a train wreck end. We'll be back to talk about the Tigers and the Big Ten realignment and probably some like Pittsburgh Pirates change up from Hanrahan or whatever. We hope you keep listening. We'll be back after the short break.